I don't know, man. Like, I've already called in the heavy guns. Like, got to take care of this situation. Like, it can't really happen on my watch. Like, remember, I got like billions of kids here. And these kind of systems just don't, they're systems of control. That's kind of obvious. And they don't offer much expansion. That's the other thing. Like, if they try to lie to you and tell you, oh, but it's because we're prepping, we're getting ready for the, and this is what they talk about in the lodges and things, and what people have been talking about. They promise them all these different levels of expansion of knowledge, and then they have passcodes, things that they don't even know what it means. And then when they even go try to find out, it's all tied into some system, some web, some weaved story that the poets or the papacy have put together. So, as you can see the URL there, it's wikipedia.org/wiki/Hun and Po, which I did actually type in there, but as you see, it doesn't render the proper information. So this is a concise story, because I'm going to explain this, and then we're going to take a brief break here so I can get some water and a couple other things and freshen myself up. Maybe we should begin on this when I come back, but I'll start now. And this has a lot to do with the moon. But for you to understand this, and remember, the Chinese have been doing this for thousands of years. Like, their records have really been, in a sense, some of the most documented in regards to what's going on in the spiritual plane. But this also makes them some of the most heavily tampered with, okay? So you can tell in the Chinese documentation, just like in the Falun Gong, they talk about how at a 2,000-year period, after 2,000 years, the language that was actually in use was lost. So nobody could even read that language. And that language was most of what the spiritual texts were written in. So then this new Confucianism and these different levels of thought start coming through using parts of what was going on in the ancient teachings and this new teaching, because you would go through these times where these emperors, which are supposedly the rulers, the kings, will burn everything, because what would happen is that one of these 6 kings would come into their country and then basically put the whole country on dominion, and because they understood what the command really was, they would dispose them of all the languages and different things that they had that were non-conforming to the geometry that they wanted people to conform to. And they knew mentally, physically, spiritually what they wanted people to conform to, because they were also under the guidance of an overall malevolent force, just the negative frequency in itself, or the frequency imbalance, we'll call it that, okay? So what you're dealing with is when you read the Chinese tradition, it's better to take it, especially if you don't know where you're looking at, with a grain of salt. So don't be looking at just the definition of the Hun and Po and then expect yourself to go and be a Taoist later on and understand that you're going to find the path of truth. I'm giving you a disclaimer here. What's happened is the same thing that's happened in all these other religions, where you get centralized characters, centralized themes, obeisance, servitude, and these kind of things as the path of being that to enlightenment, when the path to enlightenment is within, okay? So that disclaimer, then to explain to you what a Po is. Now, Po, because I'm still having to explain to you with these popes how Po people basically get rich. So Po is, in every tense, what they call the actual spirit. Okay, here's the easy way. You see this as a spirit then. Okay? Let's say this is the spirit, right? We're just going to use this symbol today. And the reason is because it's still divided in two. So people have to understand this about spirits, right? Spirits is plural. Okay? It's still the same dualities and triplicities and all this, because it's all dividing the circle, right? Dividing the circle actually equals time. So soul is, you can't even draw it. So understand the differentiation, because anytime someone differentiates and says, this is the kind of something, if you're talking about anything on the etheric plane, then you're talking about spirits. And their stories are vast. The different races of spirits and different kinds of entities, different geometries and symmetrics and all that stuff will blow a person's mind. And it doesn't, for people who can't comprehend all of that, they're not allowed to, because they don't even have the capacity. And this is why they still believe that I'm here on my own. Human beings are the only sentient life form. I haven't seen any other sentient life, yet, they're walking all on top of sentient life. You see what I mean? So understand, blind giant with one eye, cyclops, closed, is generally the metaphoric depiction of a being running around in delta frequency most of the time, right? Still in mama's womb. So this is what happens. The Po are, in a sense, the Pope, okay, of a fruit. Okay? And this is another way of explaining it. If we take, let's say, this apple or orange, the pulp is the part that is made, what the apple is made out of. Why the juice, excuse me, the juice is what's squeezed, that is where all the energy, or a lot more of the concentrated energy and the life force of the actual substance is, okay? So you understand the relation between the pulp and the juice, or the pulp and the juice, or because it's the same thing. There's the pulp, as you'll read in this terminology, is what remains on earth, okay? When the spirit separates, like basically the person leaves out of the body, they still didn't receive the whole transmission about their time lordness, etc. Then all of a sudden, boom, the po, okay, goes back to the earth. It stays in the earth, but it's like an ethereal being, excuse me. While the han, as you'll see in this text, is what goes to the spiritual plane. And they say the easiest way to understand these two, because they say it's such a deep concept to really understand its differentiation with the spirits, but they say that the han is more of the things that naturally occur, that you cannot stop, like the forces that are tied into that, like why the sun rises every morning and why things even grow and stuff, that just because you don't feel like doing it today doesn't mean that it doesn't get done. And this gives you at least a reality that you can eat, function, have some level of happiness in, okay? So they say that is the han. So every person in this spirit that they create, they have this han, this good side to them, okay? And then why, and this is, excuse me, not good or bad, excuse me, they have this han, which is more of tied into what controls the higher systems, the instincts, etc. Well, maybe not even instincts. I have to be very clear here, but it controls the higher things that are deemed as cosmic, okay? While the po controls the earthly things, okay? And this is why I believe personally that the Pope chose this particular term, and it was because they rule over the earth, because they constantly, with refraction from the moon, which this explains, po means the light from the moon, that they are able to keep their knowledge and systems and structures running here on earth as sequential, meaning that they keep reincarnating over and over again, but consciously, and then they go and they start this same system again with the apple and the command, and then from there, everyone's looped up and tied up, and then that starts the matrices again, and they run on these large time spans, right? So some people think I'm making a gander, maybe not, but I'm going to prove it. Because that's all I have to do. That's all I can really do, is keep proving that what you're dealing with is poets. And the reason is they call themselves poet, Dead Poet Society, Conehead, if you ask me. But the poet, right, he makes stories, right? Now, the interesting thing here is that with poetry, and again, we're not talking about eclectic people doing poetry. We're talking about the abuse, okay? Because language and different things could have an entirely different meaning if there wasn't so much abuse. But these poets wrote doctrines, right? Because that's what a poet is capable of doing, telling a very intricate story that gets people entertained. This doctrine then becomes indoctrination, okay? Right? So this is basically when the poet writes something that a person takes internally, and then it begins to control the nation of not only their being, but also their external nation and how they work. And then these poems are popular religious books, whether one knows this or not. And some people say, well, good, I'm glad that didn't happen in Islam. It happened on all systems, all these program systems where there is an external entity in which to give obeisance to will disempower you anyway. It's physics. If you send a signal out that should be sent in order for it to build and charge, so that way you can continue to boost. You see what I mean? There's a reciprocal system that goes on when you send energy inside as a torus, and it keeps going out, right? And then there's another system where you become a vortex or a vacuum, and this is because you're always looking for something. Give me, give me, give me, give me. Vortex or vacuum. God's in the sky, right? So what was the metaphor? Well, the Germanic god Gud, who was king or the Khan, said that, hey, angels, meaning aristocratic branches, do not mate with men, meaning the son of men, do not mate with the daughters of man, meaning the other people that live in all these different countries, because you'll mess up the bloodline, okay? And this is because you see what I'm talking about here? Like it gets into deep stuff. It's not that these angels in heaven and then this big God and all this kind of stuff creating this world. And man, that's the furthest from what's going on. If you can do that, then you don't do this. You see what I mean? Like, if you can create worlds and all that kind of stuff, you don't leave worlds in dominion. It only becomes when you can't do that, and then you start trying to steal somebody else's, con somebody else's, these kind of things, right? So this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with that this club, or whatever they're calling themselves, of poets, have placed indoctrination through their languages, Beta 1, Spanish, Beta 2, English. What are they? English, high elf, low elf, the whole battle. And here's another thing. This gets into even time travel. And some would say this is a gander, or maybe not. But what you're actually looking at, because some are still trying to figure out, well how does all this come about? Okay, now remember this image. And what this image shows you is these other things called grooves, which you'll notice talked about when Gotland is spread out in most papers, that there's this weird phenomena of something going on there where there are stones that are found with these deep grooves in them, okay? Now, the more popular theory is that because of the way that these grooves are made, and stones actually being able to connect together where grooves matched, that there was a large device, and I'm only giving you the more fanciful tale because I can make it very simple here, but there was a more larger device that was created that was actually some kind of calendar or module of the world, possibly the first time machine. This is for all of those that are still supporting the knowledge that Jesus may have had arrived in a time machine in a point in time, in a spot of time for just one moment, but not afterwards, causing a phenomena of what you were seeing would happen with Constantine when he went on to go under the inspiration. Okay, so the reality is that would be the fanciful tale. There's enough here to maybe say that they're just sharpening swords. But anyone who wants that's the French part of today's conversation. You want to look deeper into those grooves and understand what exactly was constructed there in order to make those grooves. I think that is a very important part of understanding what exactly was going on, even if it was just to shape and fashion some kind of some kind of device. But the craftsman work here in Gotland is still far more superior at that time of the world than everywhere else. So alchemical knowledge had been passed into the hands of these individuals, because remember, the other keys to the alchemical knowledge was how to utilize the metallurgy, which is actually the boiling down of metals and shaping, forming, fashioning them, which we know comes from Kemet. So it is highly possible also that even in terms of what the Egyptian consciousness was really about during the times that we've been recording, because the Egyptians had 10 present as Nefer in their hieroglyphics, it's highly possible that many of these systems of control were in fact Egyptian first. But that doesn't mean that should come as a surprise, seeing that the prism, and the whole use of that kind of art and craft was in that country, and it doesn't mean that everyone is devoid of being able to use it on his brother, sister, etc. Okay? So we're going to take a break here for a moment. We're going to talk about the keys to spontaneous regeneration. And that's going to bring us to the close of what the Buckminster Fuller really did create, or the Buckminster. Notice on the crest, there's a buck there. I mean, there's an affinity for the buck. Okay? So a Buckminster is the minister of the ones who have as their totem the buck. So what did Buck figure out? And that will allow us to close with the full identification of the real game right on cusp of the World Cup, which they're about to have right now. And then that'll be today's message. And then we'll, of course, be clearing this up throughout the weekend or throughout the week. So let me just take a brief moment here. Okay, so I figured out that what was going on when I was given the definition of English also, I didn't finish up. So it's very important for you to understand what English actually is and why it becomes so combative. And remember, they don't speak English, but I won't say that they're speaking a better language, because more than likely they're in a language that has full intent of what they're involved in. And because English has different angles to it, okay? And so these angles are this, okay? These are angles, right? And so what happens then, if you understand or understand this geometry, and this is a big key, these then are the 5 angles that something can be opposed to something else, okay? Just like in this symbol, the angle is different. It's actually a pyramid and 2 pyramids, so there's really only just 2 forces to use. You see what I mean? So in this, and then as it, obviously as it spreads out, then you got 6 forces, etc. But here, and these forces are neither good or evil. It's important for people to get beyond that and then just see what I'm saying here is that then if this is the angle that something is moving in, and let's say, for instance, this is Earth, and it is devoid of these other angles, then it is off balance. And so what the angles do then is that there's a representation or a representative of each angle. They just try to get a person to, well, you can be a fire person, or you could be a water person, okay? And as long as you're on that angle with your elf wave, this is meaning the tone and the vibration that you're speaking backwards, because obviously the words are backwards, okay? That lends more credit to what I was saying about English backwards, which is quite interesting. Like I said, you figure out what you've really been up to. So what happens is that the elf waves that we're sending across with the tones and the vibrations of a confused, conflictive mind, because we are on this angle. And that's why I said, hey man, what's your angle? Like, what is why are you doing this? Why are you in this? Like, what do you want? What do you need? Like, what's your motivation? Blah, blah. Those are all people's angles. So because they're doing this, then it leaves them unable to create balance within this system. So all of these stars, okay, and this is what we all have to begin to realize and see, especially when you're playing around in 3D, is that all of these stars still connect to certain occult symbols. Yeah. Okay? Oof. Oh, yeah, I definitely. Oh, now live! Yeah, those 7-pointed stars, like I said, they don't divide into circles, so when you first think about to draw one, it doesn't work out. And then these kind of systems, okay? And then that Enneagram, you could have a go at it. One time I busted that thing out on live on air, but anyway. And because these are a part of the construct, they're not devoid of the programming and the limitations of the construct, okay? And what happens is what a tarot would be then, because remember, if you have this body then, right? Let's get a good body going on here, which is a wheel in itself, right? And you got this place here, you got the bolt-ons because of the different realities that you came from and the perceptions that those realities equal. Because then when you're using a certain state of your consciousness, it kind of connects into the actual planet that corresponds to that state, a planetary state of mind or overall frequency of what that, how that vibrates. And then what happens is that there is a shadow world down here, and I had a really good image of it. But there's a shadow world that as you as being light, you cast. Just like you cast a shadow on the floor, it's like still there. Mine's starting to disappear. But anyway, that's what we're talking about. So what happens is the shadow that's cast based on what you're doing sometimes becomes, or in most cases for many people, especially if you're casting shadows, the duality. Because every action is a reaction. So if you don't send out something balanced, you're not going to get something balanced back. Some people think that if they fire off at somebody because that person fired off at them, that they're going to get the same result back. Man, you got to be sitting down thinking for a while to actually calculate what is going to be able to cancel out another person's frequencies that may be negative, because you have to make sure that you send back at that, not something that's just going to fuel the fire, but something that's going to cancel it all together. You know what I mean? And so that's a much more deeper thing. But just realize the angles, because what happens is, because 5 as a number is not complete, it needs this other world, which is another 5, right? But sometimes a bolt-on 6, okay? And this is what you would be dealing with in states of consciousness. And this is why consciousness is so deep, because a person can have several different of these kind of configurations, and because their bodies are functioning as time machines. Why? Because the person's basically still stuck in the stage of time that they're actually inhabiting. It's like even if they're present right now, but they really don't feel what's actually happening, is because the body is still stuck in a certain age and time. So remember what I'm saying, that to be a time traveler is to be able to change. Is to be able to have a very, very adept stage of consciousness with your mental, physical, and spiritual movements, and how that feels internally to you. Not so much as externally, because there's a joke about this world. And that joke is that when the world finds truth, you'll see it. Meaning that it will reflect so strong that everything will change itself into its perfection. And until then, just assume that truth has not yet completely come, meaning that you have not completely gone into total realization until everything is transparent to you, until there's no more judgments. Because with every action such as judgment, there's a spin of current. And then when that current doesn't come back because you planted the seed somewhere that didn't even... Just watch, time yourself, and see how often does the mind think about things that you can't even really change, especially on a level that you may be on. So when you get to a level of being able to change what Dan or Oprah or whoever on whatever station is doing, why even think about them? And then when you calculate how much time the mind is in Rome, because it actually is in Rome still, if the person doesn't realize that that's all of the energy that is necessary for them to fully carry out a path and gain a ring or a chakra or a certain stage of consciousness that is sound that you can stand on. Because what you're looking at with all these systems is they're like cogs, right? So when the body is completely constructed of all these cogs, oh, don't let one break, because the whole machine will shut down. And this is why many don't find themselves into the fully activated state all the time, including myself, because there's still things that need to be fixed. Like you have to go in, you have to be willing to go in, you have to be willing to wait the time for a part to be swapped out. All of this kind of stuff is just a different level of terminology to what a person is going to have to do in order to metamorphosize themselves. You're going to have to be the surgeon of yourself. You go back in and you start making the proper incisions in order for you to correct the situation, because this is still at the end of the day on you. Like while you have everyone else around you and all these nations around you, in the divided world, you come in as one split into two, okay? Like that's the dual body. So, but still realize when you come in the soul state of consciousness, you're fully pervading and connected to everything. So the outward show of being connected to something never is superior to the inward show of connectivity. And that's why we talk about understanding, because you have to get to a point where, or you get to a point that you connect with yourself within so that it reaches and brings and attracts what You are what you need, etc., from outside, okay? So remember, it's magnetic, not you chasing it, because this is a misuse of energy chasing something. It's out there, it's so far. Imagine how long it may take to get to it if I tell you it's on Pluto. And all of these religious structures are like that. They're designed after deities, archons, which reside in the mind, just eidolons. That's why they tend to not manifest, except for through who? Right? Like anytime there's a God, as they show you in the ancient traditions, they show you God never was without this person who said that he met or found God. Like God never actually came by himself. Why? Because who really invented God as the position that God is in? Now that you know that God is good. You see what I mean? Like, who said that that was the ruler and the leader? The sword. Okay, so this gets us to something, because some people say, well, I know what you're saying. I know. It's because, though, we still, what we're going to do about it? Supreme HUD. What are we going to do? Trilateral. Right? So this is what my brain does, right? Because I gotta navigate strange space, sometimes enemy territory, till they figure out we're not enemies. You know, they think sometimes the Jedi mind trick is like, we are enemies. What are you telling me? No, we're not together. Your Jedi tricks don't work on me. You know, there's all this, you know, you tell a person, you're a supreme being. No, I'm not. There's one greater than me. Okay, but let me show you something. This is how it's not going to be done. Yeah, that's the correct tense. This is not how it's not going to be done. This is how it is being done. Okay, because we're doing it. So here, there's the military. Okay? Here, there is a bank. And here, there is, a little eyeball, religion. Okay? Dogma. Okay? Company of Jesus. So, realistically, if you think you're going to beat the military with physical means of how they work, their angle, forget it. Seen a machine, they park it at the end of the block, and they just turn it on. And then what it does is it hits these nodes that cause you to lose balance. Then nothing in the neighborhood is really messed up or destroyed, and there's no threat. Just it's a truck with a huge dish on top. So this means if you go listening to Tubal Cain and pick up some little metallic sidearm and expect to go against inverted Mars, not balanced Mars, inverted Mars, Samuel with one eye out, forget it. Okay? So this is only talking to me. I'm not talking to you. But some people find themselves as me when I'm in the clear face. The bank. So I was sitting down with Donald Trump, Ted DiBiase on the Astral plane. All the money, supposedly. Ciphering energy in a tense of seeing that if I get rich, mega rich, can I fix this problem? There's an issue. The people who printed the money, the greenback, the talisman, and the God Gud they trust, have this system going on that works like alchemy with it. And this alchemy functions as that basically, no matter how much you get, they're still going to have more. Because after all, they're printing it. So anything that you could actually do to completely overthrow the whole system, it won't be being done with money, because there's also a whole other tie and connection to it when you get a lot of it and you start not wanting to leave and ego starts to build up and you forget to shave him down and, you know, all sorts of stuff that happens with the money thing, so we won't even go to that. But this, especially if you never have no money, forget it. But we have something. We have a weakness. The weakness is their religion and their spirit, which is nil. They don't have power there. It's like they're just hoping people don't catch up to what's really going on with the religions. And that most of the whole combative nature of what we've been up to is even written in books. Oh, about to go against that tribe. Look, it's all of these people. It's everywhere. Don't even think that it's just exclusive between two races. Every time you got next door neighbors doing it now because no one knows that they're functioning on the angle. Right? Nobody knows that they were once high elf wave. Right? Now they're dark elves, as it says, right? The dark elf, right? What is the dark? Devoid of light. What does devoid of light mean? Something undiscovered. What does undiscovered means? We have ignorance about it. This is not bad or good. Do you see how that works? Some people are in those process trying to define and judge, hanging on each word, never to bring its sentence completely back into balance. It says the undiscoverable. So when you say what is black, it's the undiscoverable. People are ignorant about it. So what is black though? Ignorance. You see? So they work synonymous with one another. You see? And then what does light do? You see? Light has no function without darkness. There's nothing to shine upon. You see? So all these kind of things, and this is all still encased in what? The prism. So I broke out. I broke back in. Break back out. Break back in. Pen is more powerful than the sword, my Lord, meaning that the pentagram is more powerful than the sword. To know about the pentagram defeats the cross. Surely the pentagram is more powerful than the sword, my Lord. Yes, surely 5 is more powerful than 4, my Lord. Surely fire is more powerful than swords, my Lord, because it takes fire to make swords, my Lord, meaning it takes men to make swords, to use fire to do that, my Lord. See, this is what you're dealing with these kind of beings, right? And it's such a, like I said, it's a real game. That's why real game, even in itself, right, it has this parody to it, right? Because if it's a game, how can it be real? And this is the key then to spontaneous regeneration. It's when you actually are able to shut it off. Shut it off. At the end of the day, when I'm done, away with thee. Away with you, storyteller. Let me go into the deepest recesses of my thought. And there, nothing can invade. And it's only energy charging. See, people needed to realize, I gave the secret away like 3 episodes early in the beginning, that when you go into meditation, don't try to visualize something. The only thing you're doing is storing energy to cultivate for what you're going to need later. And this is called cultivation, and then breeds consecration. So cultivation first, and this is why you're sitting here. And let me see, I can't get the camera down there. Let me get the camera. Okay. All right. So it's cultivation because like right here and down here, all this area underneath you is a hole, okay? And that hole, when it presses down to the place that you're cultivating, which should be outside in nature, right? Then you root based on how much thrust, like this is actually hot air coming from underneath you based on the breathing technique. Then as those roots go down into the soil, just like any other plant on a planet or a planet, they cultivate. And this cultivation is growth because the person is actually bringing in etheric minerals, right? And this etheric minerals give the person the ability to begin to produce alpha waves. So like the DNA, sidebar, but DNA is given one basic command: produce protein enzyme. Because that's the basic building blocks to everything. Like for me personally, the Astrozyme G, those kind of enzymes actually put the real building blocks to a system to where you're not burning as much fuel doing certain other things. You see what I mean? So this system of planting, right? I've also got this out as charts and things that I'm introducing here in not too long when they're fully complete or ready for their open source updates. But you're basically, just to understand it very simply and why this technique is so important, is because you have to be cultivating somewhere. And most people at some point in some time, when you become an adept, you can cultivate from anywhere because your etheric root pushes through all of these other porous surfaces that are still conducted of a certain frequency. And so when your frequency, your wave, your elf wave, is one that's so high that it allows you to travel through etheric thoughts. Okay? Think of what I'm talking about. You're like on that thing, right? And if you're on this high elf wave, right? We'll just call it that. Okay? You're on this high elf wave. It's allowing you to go through the holes of the reality, right? Of the spaces that contain the etheric nature or the highest purification of what you're seeking, right? But if you're riding on a low elf wave, these are your frequencies, okay? Then you are like this huge blob of mass trying to, instead of going through this, you're going to knock it out of the way, right? Or you're going to collide with it. This is why I said nanospace and these quantum spaces offer great potential, because there's unlimited room. That it's not the way that the bigger that it gets, the more room you have. It's the smaller that it gets, because there is no disturbance of the potential of things that are taking place inside of it. And this is leading me to the conclusion of my conversation today. All right, so what you're looking at here then is the Borromean rings that I was talking about earlier. And that the ability to break the knot or the bond or the fist. Of course, it gets into Discordianism, and I'm not even going to get into that because I may not have, understand the whole Discordianism work, so I won't get into it now. But the work itself is very hilarious, but so close to truth. But what you're dealing with here then, and we'll just go here, is the real game, as I explained it on that image. And the real game consists of trapping beings that, i.e. fish, that think of themselves as separated, routed, not together, all by themselves, basically alone, afraid, etc., into this carbon or black cloud around their consciousness that doesn't allow them to perceive what is outside of it, thus not allowing them to venture outside of this. And so thus, when this knowledge was found, the Buckminster had uncovered how to trap energy inside of carbon, which the world was already doing. The world was already exhibiting this. This is the reason why we're in a world, is because the geometry, being used as far as the grid is concerned is that of C60, or basically a carbon-based structure that is allowed to hold life. Now, let me explain to you how deep this really is, because it may just seem like a golf ball. The reality is with this structure is, and how it works every day, is when you buy a medicine that is made by one of these companies, and it's like, supposed to help your heart and do all these different things, and you find when you take it for a good percentage of the people, just like Advil, that it actually does something. And it's because the element in which that is being transferred to you is now finally being, to cause this level of healing, is now being finally transferred to you in a form that looks like this soccer ball. And before this was discovered, it was impossible. Because let me explain how this works. If, let's say for instance, with some rosemary, you take it through a centrifuge and through a few processes, and basically it becomes a spagyric. contaminating that or exposing it to air at all will immediately kill the being, basically. It's like, or cause it to pass into another stage. It's almost like the atmosphere that we live in is just too hot and too volatile for it. The moment it becomes exposed to our reality outside the vacuum, it immediately what we call dissipates, no longer has effect, becomes opaque or putrid, okay? So it's important here to understand or understand, as I say, what I'm saying here. Let me bring this up a little bit. It's just like leaving an apple outside after you've cut into it and broke off the shell. It starts to turn brown, okay? And it starts to putrefy. So what this is about then is this is about how can you encapsulate this spagyric rosemary, keep it inside of something until it gets somewhere else. And this is what I was thinking about last night. My good friends, I was thinking, if we're traveling, where are we going? Like, and this is me putting myself in the stage of the masses because I already know where I'm going. Everywhere. But putting myself in the stage of the masses, I said, man, if we're traveling, where are we going? Why would you travel? And then I send a ping up, ping. And then I get a ping back. It said, because anyone that travels is surely going somewhere, generally as cargo. It's the Argo cargo that we're traveling through certain stage of consciousness to arrive somewhere. Something is actually expecting us. And we need to really, really tune in to understanding how to manifest that as a balanced, harmonic experience for us. This is what we call the future, right? Because as you see it now, according to if things keep taking place like they're taking place now, nobody says anything, all the people just shy back away from it, don't want to lose their millions of dollars even though they can live off 200,000 of it, and then it just keeps playing, it's not their responsibility, then we're still traveling though. You see what I mean? And who's driving? Because like I'm on the ship and I'm a good driver, so I'm at least going to go up and see if I can drive. Like all the things are relative to me. I want to know, well, what is my job? If we're all working together, like first of all, who is we're and who is they? And like who's in charge here? Who's in command? And I'm on Google, who's in command? And it's the command, and it's Viking command. And Smith Kane doesn't even talk to his kids, and there's quarrels and fights and bickerings and stuff going on. Everyone's in the prison state of mind or in the prism state of mind. There's groups and cliques, angles and motivations and all of this kind of stuff going on. Meanwhile, the children who are us, the biorhythmic vessels that are filling up our divided souls from just like Big Acer and Big Tiamat, when they split up, then all their little pieces inside of us, we get this zodiac body, this wheel-based tin man with his cogs all broken, rusted out, your facets all broken, somebody then plundered your jewel in your leg, you're walking with the crook, you can't even see straight, your third eye is blind and sewed shut, because everything that you put in your mouth actually promotes a frequency that actually keeps everything closed in fear inside of a broken shell, as you keep every time you come out cracking and beating on somebody else's and they beat back, and then you guys go back in retreating, and then meanwhile there's a sinister laugh because the harmonics of this planet are beautiful, not were beautiful. Get the difference, meaning that no matter what we are doing here, it doesn't stop the symphony. And that was the major key. Thank you. The major key was I figured out why this was going to keep going, why it was allowed to continue, and it was basic. It was because next life, they just want to know where you're going to be. Here, here, or here. Just choose one. Because if you're going to be this good person, this goody-goody person, right, then you're going to be here with these baddie people. And then you two are going to serve to get on each other's nerves. Because still both of you are inside of something. And where we really are in the higher frequencies, higher state of consciousness that are balanced is outside of all this. It's a state of mind that's still able to say, but at the end of the day, I had to shut it off. I'll do what I can here. Expand it as much as possible into those coming constantly from both sides. I said we be a light to the dark. Okay? They come from all over the place. Okay? But I'm not confused about this. Okay? And this. Right? And all of this, the Christian, right? And goth. Okay? How could I be confused? That's still good. That's still the cross. That's still the hammer. They work together. How could I be confused? So then this is what happens here. If I act like I'm confused with all this energy and power and act like I cannot see that or I don't want to accept that, I melt down. Right? From where I'm already at. So that's this date that me and the world have. Like, and it's strange, but I don't really find anyone really talking like this. If you're going to get something done, get it done. Like, figure out exactly how it works. Use the same thing they teach you in these professor schools and universities and all this kind of stuff. They teach you how to find something, research something, make a paper on it, bring schematics, open a file on it. So what do you think is the real reason, if you've learned all of that kind of stuff, that you haven't even cracked into something as simple as this? Which is the question I have to ask myself. And it's because of the programming. It's because of the grids. How we see things and how we see other people, we're too busy judging. Doing that all day before you make a move. Meanwhile, the ones in action are the ones getting the reactions. So that's what I have to say. Let me just look over my notes. And make sure, so you know, again, what this is all about then. This game is about trapping human beings inside of carbon-based structures, 666, the beast, the physical body, and then keeping them there as their cargo, energy cargo basically, fuel cells even batteries, just to store fuel, because it doesn't even seem like most of the systems on the planet even need that much energy that one human can give off. Okay? So just unused energy trapped in carbon. Phenomenal cosmic power. Itty bitty living space. So what's offered then here is the expansion behind it. But it's a deep core driller we're looking for. Expanding happens to do with an inward motion, despite what you've been told. So this deep core driller can extract the frequencies, because this is what happened with the monatomics, because there was a big upheaval with the monatomics just recently, and this is because the element is there, but the ability to mine that element is very clear from a real physical level why or why not that may or may not be possible. And it's because, just like with you, if there's something precious there, it takes a while to get to it. Okay? And when it's extracted, obviously it must be appreciated. But we have been dealing with the reality that when it extracts the greatest from us, it has a tendency to be non-appreciative. Okay? But with the nobles and the elements, and this is why I remove the synergy crystals, in that game, it's like dealing with somebody fake. If you're going to be like acting like the element's not there or acting like the crystal's not really working, I mean, maybe you need to go back to preschool then, because those are elements for adepts. It'd be better off to work with breathing, work with your eating, and work with those kind of things, because in every tense, and I have a diagram put together, you start low with the fungus. This is enzymes, getting your stomach together, probiotics, those kind of things. So that way, all the minerals and the nutrients that you're putting in your body, they actually get processed. Then you move your way through the cleanses. You know, this is like, man, we're you got to understand what we are. Those are the drills. It's like, just like anything else, somebody should whip you up, and we're going to get this thing going. Like, I'm working on this camp now, but if we're going to whip you up, it's like, man, you got to get ready to see what this thing is really about in high energy. So at first, you're going to be throwing up. There's going to be all sorts of things. But notice how it's so easy when we do it together. You sitting in there trying to do it yourself becomes an issue, right? It's like, I'm going to do it next week. I'm going to, oh, man, I forgot to take my stuff, right? But if you're around a bunch of people and then you got even overachievers, which is my superhero name, they're overachiever. It's like this, you know, he's out there all night. It's like everyone's still asleep, and, you know, he overachievers out there fucking mowing the lawn, okay? So the overachievers are also there, and then the people there, but this is all spiritual. This is a dynamic where it's pushing you into the positive and balanced stages of your consciousness. So the greatest thing that you can see from yourself or anyone else can see from you is so many times more affluent for you as a person who knows how to conserve your energy. That's the other key that had to be bolted on to a lot of these communities, a lot of these programs. You get these guys coming out there, they think they Sith Lords or Jedi or something. You have to understand how to use that energy. It's a Prius type environment you're dealing with right now. We won't be out the big guns until the overarchs concede in order for them to go into their next stage of enlightenment. Meaning that the anchors or the archons that are in people's mind, the buried psychological, mental, mind-binding traps from Odin, will have to be undone. The unbreakable knot must be broken again, just like the impossible was already done. Maybe I should start rapping or something. Anyway, maybe they'll hear me or something. Like, I don't even get it these days. It's like, yo, your boy over here. Anyway, the now delta, those who sleep. The alpha beta, those who can see. Just remember it. Other than that, that looks like it's about it. Just remember, time exists with us dividing the circle. Whether we do it 5, 6, 10, 20 times, it's still all the same thing. The key to the regeneration process is to put yourself back together, right? And this will physically manifest in your reality as a well-balanced stage of consciousness. It'll also manifest as the individuals around you mirroring that same thing. But remember, smoke rises, meaning that you have to go through the process just like everyone else. If you fell off the shelf, elf, then you have to climb back up. Like, I don't mind accepting any stage of consciousness that's going to equal expansion for me, because at the end of the day, not only did I eat it or ate it, I got numb off numbers. Meaning that there's something about this cycle that's still, for individuals that are still struggling to climb those ladders, it's numbing. It's like when you're working out and all of a sudden you stop feeling your arm and you're still going, you know, you're in the damage days. So just remember that together, you know, we have all of this. We have an array of beings. We have people who have not even come forth yet. Who knows if they ever come forth? They're still back there. They're looking at the show and they're like, man, he's saying what I'm saying. But the other thing is that you see how this rudimentary three-dimensional environment works. So instead of over here trying to use Harry Potter magic on the whole damn thing, it's probably been more beneficial for you to work with just the rudimentary sense of changing your diet and getting your enzymes straight and working with that stage of consciousness before you go off and evoke something with one of your wills that you'll be dealing with in another world as you're speaking the words of elf waves and things that you don't even really mean. You see what I mean? Like that whole kind of golden mean. Just not the thing. I'll talk to everyone soon. It's been one of those shows. But remember, this one's to be continued.